Being a longevity physician, my main ambition in life is for people to live their best version. And in 10 years of doing this work, the landscape changes every 3 months. So it's progressive, and that's how it should be. The key thing that I've discovered over the last year or two, and this is by going on conferences around the world, as well as speaking on conferences, but also speaking to like-minded individuals, neuroscientists, is that it is not enough just to look after your physicality. We think going to the gym, eating correctly, sleeping is enough. It isn't. There's a whole paradigm above this, and it is located in your brain. Your brain is the CEO of your body. It is the triage center that will dictate what's going to happen to you and what's not going to happen to you. And in knowledge of this, however much you can fix the body, and we'll talk about why it's important to fix the body. If we do not fix the mindset, if we do not train the brain in the same way that we train our bodies in the gym, we're not going to live as fulfilled and as joyful as we like. We're better, but we're not going to be that optimum state. And what is that optimum state? That optimum state is completely fulfilled, ego death, no ego, empathetical, community living, and ultimately the best version of the human form that we can be. Bearing in mind what's going on in the world at the moment, I think this is really radically essential, because there's big landscape changes going on, and we can either feed the landscape with fear or we can feed it with hope. And that, without looking at this next layer of longevity, we're never going to get there.
It sounds quite old-fashioned in a way, because when I was young, in the late 50s, just a toddler, our life was very simple. And some of the things, at least, that you mentioned, we probably had no idea actually what was going on. So to some extent couldn't exploit it. But some of the things you described sound a bit like what it was like for me when I was 8 and 9.
Yeah. And do you know what? I mean, it's fascinating that you say that, because ultimately it's something we just took for granted as normal living. But what it was doing to your internal confidence, what it was doing to your ability to deal with stress, your ability to deal with uncertainty, probably stemmed from that childhood. You can only compare yourself to sort of the new generation, often anxious, often cannot deal with uncertainty. And we're seeing a lot more physical decline as well as mental decline. And again, those solid principles of simplicity were what made your hardwiring in your brain what it is today. So the point is that actually, could we even push this even to a further level? And we talk about, you mentioned the word old-fashioned. The sort of narrative I'm talking about is beyond old-fashioned. It's going back several thousand years. And if we look at the history of longevity and cultures, the concept of improving the mind to get to that higher level, and then that further higher level, and then that further higher level, is what every human being in most cultures and religions aspire to. We talk about nirvana. We talk about moksha. It's about elevation. It's not quite new, but we didn't actually appreciate how powerful it is.
So maybe some of these religions were right, the ones that we've poo-pooed, because it sounds a bit like woo-woo. Maybe some of the things they were saying actually were true.
Yeah, well, let's talk about woo-woo. I mean, woo-woo it's not evidence-based. The point is, most of the evidence that we're finding now looks at what was going on several thousand years and is ratifying it. So what we have to now accept is science is just catching up with the true capability of the human form. The only problem, of course, is science is often dictated by pharmaceutical companies and diagnostics. Yeah. So is it that this sort of level of research is somewhat suppressed, or is the system that we look at research with, the linear randomized control science, stopping this sort of stuff coming in? However, as I said on my conferences, this narrative is getting expansive now. We're talking about the various areas of the brain and how they network and how they can influence what's going on in your physicality.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you said earlier, and then I've got a really big question for you. One of the things that you said earlier, which actually scared me a bit, you said that our brain is the CEO of our body, or of our existence, I should say.
Yes.
The reason it scares me is that my brain, and I know other people I speak to, doesn't actually behave itself. It actually gets me into some really bad places with some horrible thoughts.
Yes.
And it's quite hard to control what your brain is telling you, but it's leading you down sometimes quite negative paths.
Yeah.
And, it's quite hard to, if it's in control, then, it's going to be tough.
Yeah.
Is that true?
Yeah. I mean, so Ben, what you have to realize is the bit of the mind that you can control is your conscious mind. The bit that's in front, what you physically see, the sensations you get, the consciousness. But the majority of these issues, these deep-seated scars, I would call them, sit in the subconscious mind. Because whether it's happened in utero or as a child or growing up, it doesn't really matter. That the body's very good at putting all of that trauma into a suitcase and parking it in your subconscious mind. It's protective. It's a bit like a child that hides under a bed, saying, if the world can't see me, then it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
That's how these suitcases layer up in your subconscious mind. And why? It's protective. If you have to function on a day-to-day basis, you cannot be hampered by this thought. The problem, of course, is the brain hasn't forgotten it. It's sitting there. And most of us may not even realize where that initiates from. So what we're saying is that, fine, we're functioning on our conscious brain, but we need to think and see what's going on in our subconscious mind that drives your behavior, that even drives success. Most of the successful people in the world have a chip on their shoulder. They don't even know where it's coming from.
Yeah.
So when you get these deep thoughts, either coming through sleep or nightmares, it's that simmering, trying to get out. Now look back at cultures. You've got these South Americans, the Amazonians. They have a ceremony called Cambo and Ayahuasca. They realized even then, a few thousand years ago, things are deep-seated. So they take these herbs with a view to opening up that subconscious mind, letting these things come to the surface so you can then deal with them. So when you say it's scary, yes, it's scary. But the point is an awareness of it, linking it to what might be happening, is a way of dealing. Now, if you can take that out of the subconscious brain, the energy it's utilizing, which it is, because everything requires energy, is there for your well-being. So I feel that ultimately we live in a not a very natural world. Our issues are no longer just physicality. There's stress, there's trauma, there's psychology, all of which we park in the back office. What we're saying is, to stay well and joyful, we've got to tap into that place. Like a muscle, train it and open these chapters up.
Maybe we need a different way of thinking then, because I remember in one of my business enterprises many years ago, I used to teach consulting skills. And these 9 hopefuls would turn up, and the first morning we'd have a sort of chat, and they'd be saying to me, looking forward to this, what sort of skills are you going to be teaching us? And I said, well, we've got 3 days together. The first 2 days are going to be unteaching you everything you've learned so far and removing all those layers of crap that have accumulated and made you what you are today. And I have to tell you, most of them are going to be totally useless in what we're about to do. So maybe, given what you said, that we've, if you're my age, you've had quite a few decades of potentially being taught how to live, how to survive in this world. Maybe a lot of that needs to be undone.
Well, I think a lot of it has to be undone. And similarly, the work we've done together on fasting, removing the debris from the physicality, because if you're going to open up this part of the brain and make it neuroplastic, in other words, adaptable, you've got to be physically strong, because most of the pathways going to the brain come from the body. The CEO of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, gets messages from the body. Now, if the body's broken, bad gut, toxic liver, lots of inflammatory sugar, it's going to say and then it gets impulses from the inner brain saying, trauma is childhood, still sitting in there. The default mode network says you're still sick. Both of those, the CEO has to make a decision saying, all you guys on the boardroom are telling me one thing, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell the body it's still in crisis. So you cannot, it's not just seeing a psychologist. It's about physically fixing so that the pathways coming up are clean. Then you go to the back office. It's like Maslow's hierarchy. Fix the survival mode, then shift up in consciousness. And Dr. Hawkins' works similar. So to get to the higher consciousness, you need to fix the foundations. In yourself, you've done lots of work with fasting, cleaning out, helping the gut, cleaning the liver. And then suddenly the brain can start thinking at a higher and higher conscious level. And it's not an age-related phenomenon. It can
Oh,
happen.
okay. Well, that's because it hasn't got all this low-level crud to have to deal with on a daily basis. Yeah,
Totally.
yeah,
There is an abundance of energy that can be used.
yeah.
The body's the most sophisticated machine in history. It will always try and protect you. And if it perceives threat or real threat, it'll go down that route.
Yeah.
And if you don't access those areas in the back of the mind, don't develop them, the energy is going to be triaged wrongly. And what I believe is that if we can fix the triage of your energy in your brain, your body will be fed correctly. There'll be more harmony and balance. But the outcome of this is how you deal with other humans. When you're in survival mode, you're in fear, you're in hoarding, you're in paranoia. When you're full, you can think with compassion, you can think with purpose, you can think like a community member. And that is what we're lacking today. And we now know in longevity, the two big things are nature and communities. So how do you become community orientated? Well, you can't if you're broken. So the answer is yes, you've got to declutter before you
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Here, maybe we'll come back to that in a second and look at some practical things that we can do as well. Here's the sort of big-ish question for you. Bradley Cooper, the actor, played in a film called Limitless.
Yeah.
Basically, it was good. I thought it was a very good film. And basically, he found some substance that enabled his brain to literally multiply in its capacity. Now, there was a bit of a myth going around a few years ago that we only use 20% of our brain. And I think people misinterpret that to mean the physical 20%. But actually, there is a potential, from what you're saying, rather like the film, slightly different, which means that we've actually got super brain, superhuman powers, which, for all the reasons you've said, is that we're still fighting with all the rubbish. We're not actually exploiting. So, I mean, the potential could be incredibly exciting for individuals, but also for the world.
Well, I can't, what you just said, it summarizes it incredibly well. The situation we have is that we are not working to our potential. Even the best of us is not working to the capability of what they've got. We are, by definition, and through science, classed as Homo sapiens. The word sapiens means wisdom. The reality is none of us are operating on wisdom. There's another word called sentience. Now, animals work on sentience. That's what they feel and see and touch. If they see the wind coming in a certain way, they think it's a typhoon, they'll shift. They work on sentience. We're supposed to be sentient as well, but we've delegated that sentience out to doctors and clinicians. We don't trust our own instinct. We don't think, I've got a headache. What is it? What's caused that? What's happened to my life? I need a pill. So we've actually gone worse than the animal kingdom in the sentience pathway. Sapience is only something that humans can do, and yet none of us are operating at that higher level. Now, sapience changes us from Homo sapien, which is survival mode human, to Homo Luminous, which is the aware human. Now, this is not new. If you go back to the Taoists, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Native Americans, they always believed that by stepping their game up, by being better, they'll get higher and higher in their awareness levels to such a point that they'll shift out of their human form and join the universe, because that's the ultimate point of enlightenment. So this is not new. But now we've got science that's showing biofields and showing how the brain works, and we've got a bit of evidence, only a small bit of evidence. We now know that the capability is monstrous. There is an institute in America called the Monroe Institute that analyzes out-of-body experiences, deals with them. It talks about remote thinking. Now, remote thinking is your ability to visualize somebody a little distance away from you and understand what they're thinking about. If this can be the capability of the human form, could you imagine what else we're capable of? But we've shut down because we're operating on 5 senses. We're busy being busy. What you see, what you hear, what you think. We're working out of fear of dying, fear of not having a pension, fear of our mortgages, fear of everything. We're not allowing that higher consciousness to develop because it can only come when you're abundant. So when that happens, what happens to you? Well, first of all, your energy levels are preserved to a massive level because they're not fighting inflammation and fear. That energy then comes back and nourishes your cells. So your cells go into harmony. Once that happens, you're abundant internally, which means that your ego drops. Once your ego drops, you can start behaving with other humans in a different way. And you can see the dominant effect across society and the globe. Doctors, you would be what I would call a proper aware human being. You'll be empathetical, so you'll make wisdom-based decisions, not intelligence. We're only putting emphasis on intelligence. It's bigger than that.
So the connectedness, which is the word you used a few sentences ago, is joined to what you've just said in terms of human behavior. And I know from my work, if I go back to my psychology days, we were taught using some fantastic they weren't online in those days, but it was a mix of database stuff and face-to-face. We were taught about observing or being a part of the dynamic that was going on in the room in a team, on a team-based experience, as well as actually transactionally engaging with any individual topic. And what they tried to teach us or open up to us was, you need to, if you don't sit above or have the capability to sit above, you're basically going to argue. I'm probably not explaining this very well.
No,
you end up arguing with the other person about the issues. You end up defending your position. The more then they argue, the more you defend. And actually you end up nowhere apart from both of you are stressed. And there's a completely different way, an empathetic way, you said, of actually dealing with it. Did that rambling make any sense?
It does. And you must feel it. You can sometimes go into a boardroom and the energy is good. There's a warmth. You can be yourself. There's some, what I call purposeful, truthful conversation. And there's others where everyone's got their back up. It's a defensive stance. And ultimately, the latter is where most of the world is today. Countries are defensive about their own positions. It'll never work. It never has, historically or otherwise. Communities are breaking down. That energy that you describe by being in the presence of someone is breaking down because we're doing a lot online. And remember, humans radiate energy. You thrive off energy. Food is not the only form of energy for you. Light is, air is, and humans are. So without that connectedness, we're breaking apart. And, so for me, what you've described in that psychology is exactly a version of what we're talking about. But we need to understand it's more powerful than we think. It's not in health issues, but your own joyful, purposeful issues too. When I interviewed the Aborigines, the Maasais in Kenya, they didn't understand the word stress. And, in my mind, when I was doing that, I was very much in cellular longevity. Fixing your matter, didn't think so much about the brain. And when I said to them, I tried to describe stress, they didn't understand what the word was. And then I thought, let me talk a little bit about bereavement. What happens? How do you feel when your mother or your father dies? And the answer was, we have 100 mothers and fathers. We have a community. So you can imagine the strength of the community is so powerful that it can even deal with bereavement in a different way. Yet for us, we're in a very different position, completely different position. And we put ourselves in that position. We're externally abundant, but internally empty. And I think that's the problem.
Let's come on to some specific things we can do to help people and to open up this subject. Before we do that, the challenge I expect is, you, in your work in longevity, you know a lot about the behaviors of fitness and food, and indeed, medicine as well. But you will know it's actually quite hard to get people to change their habits, to the point where, sometimes with the best will in the world, people actually struggle. I know you've done some good work on that. How much of a challenge is it going to be to get people to address the brain and human factors that you're now describing?
So in my experience, the two assets that a coach, and I'm using the word coach because I do believe that this can be extended outside the doctor forum. It could be with anyone who's got a passion for the subject. If I had an hour with you and I explained to you how your body works in an interconnected way, I explained to you the impact of what you've put in a suitcase years ago is having on you now. And I explained to you that if we can give you back that purpose and agency so you could become that human superhero that we all have within us, I find that the patients decompress right in front of my eyes because I'm explaining it in scientific terms. So what I say is, we've got to clean you out first physically. And it's a step-by-step approach. We're going to clean your gut, we're going to clean your liver, we're going to fast you. And then after that, we're going to mentor you. We're going to check in with you every week to make sure you're okay and see you through this difficult patch. Once we've got that, they start rising. They're rising in confidence. They look at themselves thinking, I look different. I sleep different. I feel different. It becomes self-fulfilling. And then they start listening to themselves. Once you get that point, and then I say to you, right, let's go into your mind now. What can we do to open up those channels in the mind? Well, the first part of the mind is the vagus nerve coming out of it, the rest and digest. And in our case, most of that's paralyzed. If you've had insomnia or gut issues, your vagus nerve has been paralyzed. And why? Because the fight or flight's been wired forever.
Right.
And, so we've got to wake this guy up and say, you know what, you've got to balance this guy out because you're the one who's got the brakes on him. So we do vagus nerve work with holotropic breath work. We do hormesis. We do things, but because the body's now clean, it kind of works.
Yeah.
We also get them to sleep. Once we've got the vagus nerve, then I say to them, you've got a phenomenal brain of several organs. And we talked about the CEO of the brain, but let's look about where he's getting his messages from. Well, the body. Now we fixed your vagus nerve. Those body messages are going to be nice. What about what's stuck in the back of your head? Let's get granularly talk about your childhood, your school, etc., and find out where that short circuit has happened. Once we enable people to be aware of that short circuit, we can then talk to them and say, that short circuit memory is stuck in part of your brain called the hippocampus. It's your memory circuit. But that memory can be changed. There's also something called your default mode network. It's what identifies you as your identity. We can train that part of the brain to give you a different identity. There's something called a salience pathway where we can put purpose in your mind. But every morning when you wake up, you be grateful for what you've got and what you're going to achieve in the next day or two or the next several hours. Suddenly, the brain CEO is getting positive messages and positive messages go down. And if you keep working on this, you escalate and escalate and escalate and escalate. So my view is you can't say to individuals, let's achieve everything at the same time. What we do is we break it down into those 8 phases of recovery. And I almost say, I will guarantee you success because I'm working with your cellular mechanism. 12 hallmarks of aging, 300,000 papers written on it. And now I've got neuroscience supporting what I'm saying too. So once you give people what I call hope or purpose, Bernard, you'll be surprised how the human form's intuition says, I get that. The alternative, let's give you a sleeping tablet. Let's give you
Well,
do you
I think
that? No.
Yeah. That was what was going through my mind because I'm not being, deliberately critical of the medical industry or the general practitioner structure, especially in the UK. But if you go into a GP surgery and say, I can't sleep, then I'm 99% certain you'll walk out 5 minutes later with a sleeping dose of some description.
Or there'd be a bit of lip service to stop being so stressed. I mean, that's the most, it's an awful thing to say to someone when you've not seen what's happened in their lives in the past, present, and what their concerns are about the future. You've got to go into that head. You've got to align and use that aura, that connectiveness between two humans and saying, I'm here for you. We had the churches before. We had individuals in society, the elders in the society. All that's broken. There's no confidence left in these individuals. And I think if we're going to survive this, we need to bring that community, whether it's a one-to-one, whether it's a community of people, whether it's whatever way it looks, doesn't matter. But without that, we're not going to be able to open these pathways.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to remain insecure. Okay,
so to be fair to the general practitioner, he or she's only got 5 minutes, 10 minutes. They're probably not going to see the patient again for quite a long time. So what's the least risky thing they can do? Well, if somebody wants to sleep, the safest safer in the sense of achieving an instant outcome, is to give them a pill. To put them on a program is going to be quite expensive, probably quite difficult to get the right person to do it. So it's going to be the last thing that would occur, which makes me think quite a lot of restructuring is going to be necessary if we're going to have to rethink. It might ultimately actually be cheaper for society, but a lot of stuff's going to have to happen if we're going to, reshape, transform the way we actually do things medically.
Well, let me give you an example. We've done this as a charity for 15 people. These were severely disabled patients with multiple sclerosis, etc. My input was to open this narrative up, as I did. And then what I did was work with a like-minded health coach who lived in that community. That like-minded health coach literally had sessions with all of these individuals, group and WhatsApp. I didn't need to see them till the end of the program. My intervention was that first hour, and the health coach managed all 15. In fact, the first cohort was 10, the second was 5. What has happened is a percentage of that 15 cohort have now become health coaches that want to help other people. What I feel is if we are trying to break the conventional structure, it will never happen. It's too polarized. What you have to do is work around it and enable this narrative to get outside the walls of medicine and into the communities with these health coaches that can be trained up, who are passionate, who are connected. So I feel the solution here will not be the medical system. The solution here is health coaches and community leaders. And that is not a difficult thing to train up because we've shown that we could do it very quickly. And, ultimately we'll continue to do our work. But people like yourself who are knowledgeable and aware and doing podcasts to improve awareness, that's what you're doing. You're opening up the door. And now with AI and technology and the ability to put things together, lots of people can be reached very quickly. But you have to open that door in order for them to understand that there is a different way, because most don't believe there is a different way.
Yeah, no. Well,
they get sicker and sicker and sicker and sicker, and a greater burden to the healthcare system because they're not working. They end up being physically ill. We know that mental health and physicality illness are directly linked. There's a greater burden on the medical system that does not have a solution.
I think we talked about this subject before, but I suspect in some way the amount of medicines there are in the industry can actually get in the way. If you're trying to do some of the things and you want to sort of deconstruct the situation a bit, it's quite hard to do that if there's a lot of medicine flying around.
There's about close to potentially 200,000 potential medications out there, and medicines work in a linear way. They cause havoc across the whole system, but they work in one particular direction, which is why when you start somebody on something, they end up having a side effect and you give them something else and something else. It's not unusual for people to be on 15 or 20 medications over the age of 75. Now, the point is, these are then subduing the cells to be able to do what they want to do. They're subduing the body. They're subduing your ambition, your ability to do something for yourself. So the reality is, if there is no other option available to you, that's fine. I've been responsible for poisoning lots of people in my early career inadvertently, but now I know there's another way. And so a lot of doctors aren't aware there's another way. They're increasingly being made aware, but it's not so simple. It's not just medicines though, Bernard. We've got toxins in our environment. You're breathing in heavy metals as we speak.